6 p.m. Now, get ready for more Ask the Experts.
And we are back. That was a great show before this. That's Tina Lord. She's been with us forever. I don't think she was feeling real well today, so we ran one of her past shows. But we are live, and boy, is this a happy subject or not a happy subject? If you get them out of what's coming after them, it can be very happy. So let me introduce you to Attorney Michael Miller. Attorney Miller does tax relief, and I got to tell you something. Talk about something that can keep you up late at night. But first of all, introduce yourself to everybody because we get new listeners every week.
Yeah, so I'm a solo practitioner, law office of Michael K. Miller. I have an office in Palm Beach on Worth Avenue, and been at that location.
Don't let that scare you.
Oh, no. Been there. I answer all my own phones and keep the overhead down, so, the
Well, that's good, though.
Small office, you'll see when they come in. So, been there about 9 years, been practicing law about 30 years. All here in Palm Beach County.
Why did you choose tax resolution?
I had a tax background, and I enjoy doing it. I enjoy turning over cases. They get resolved. I resolve them quickly, and I move on to the other one. I'm not a fan of litigation where it drags on for a year, 2 years, and I'd like to get the gratification of helping the client and turn another and start working on another
great
case.
gratification.
So I like that part of it, as opposed to other areas of law where it drags on, family law or litigation.
Did I read something where the IRS has hired a lot of new agents?
Well,
is that true?
They always asking for more money from Congress. They've had, in the local office here, they've had a lot of people retire in the last year or so. So they have had to hire more agents and more revenue officers. Revenue officers are the bill collectors, and they're the ones that most people are going to interact with.
Okay.
You're only going to interact with a revenue agent when you have an audit. But most of the time, you're going to be in a collection matter where they're trying to collect a tax you owe, and in those cases, you're either going to deal with a local person called a revenue officer, or you're going to be dealing with the IRS back office, which automatic collection system. So
I like surprising you. So we've been sitting here, Michael and I, for like the last 10, 15 minutes talking. So I'm going to throw something on you because we got a note today from a young lady who said that she got, and I hope she's listening right now, she got an envelope in the mail. And she got it 3 weeks ago. First of all, she wants to know, is that real? And the reason why she really wants to know, she said, I don't have the nerve to open it up.
This is not good.
No. But I wanted her to hear it from you, though. Is that how they start off?
Yes.
Okay.
It's
so
probably legit
is,
as opposed to if she would have said.
Because you hear all the stuff that.
Yeah. If she would have said, I got a phone call, I would have said probably not legit.
Okay.
But the fact that she got a letter, now it could be a letter from one of these national tax relief companies that makes their marketing letter look like an IRS document and try to fool you into calling some 800 number. So it's possible it's that. But it's a letter from the IRS. It's probably a collection letter. So generally what happens is
when you hear scams about the IRS, especially down here.
But they will usually call you.
Okay.
Because that works well. They don't want to bother with letters. So it's probably legit, but it's never a good idea to ignore the letter. First of all, you should always, if it's certified, you should always go and pick it up because the most important letters that they sent will be sent certified mail.
Okay.
So if you get a certified mail and you're not there and they leave you with the notice, you should go pick it up. Because of all the letters the IRS sends, there's only one that's really important, that really means anything.
Okay.
And that one will be sent certified mail. And that
But do they send them to start off as regular mail?
Yes. So generally what happens when you file a return, after about 30 days, they process a return. And the tax hits the system. And then they send you a bill, a notice to pay. And they will normally send you about 3 letters, just standard collection letters that say, the first letter is sort of nice. It says, please pay us, you owe this money, we got your return, and so forth. Then the letters get a little more serious, and the next letter or the one after will say, notice of intent to seize your property, okay? But it doesn't say final notice.
Okay.
They don't mean anything. Before they can take any money from you, we're going to talk about levies in a minute.
Yes,
Before
right.
they can take any money from you, which is called a levy, they have to send you a certain type of notice and give you a right to a hearing. And the notice is called, the title of it is Final Notice of Intent to Levy and Right to a Hearing. And it's sent certified mail. And they only have to send you that one time.
This is over what period of time from the first one?
About 6
till you-
months.
Okay.
Okay. So they'll send you the first 3, and they sound kind of threatening, but they really don't mean anything.
Okay.
And then they'll send you the certified letter, and that's your heads up that they're ready to do something. They're now ready to exercise their rights. So if you don't do anything when you get that final letter, after 30 days, they have to give you 30 days to ask for this hearing. And if you don't ask for the hearing or you ignore the letter, then they can take the money right out of your bank account on the 31st day.
Wow.
Or they'll send a notice to your payroll department and you won't get a paycheck next week. So you don't want to let it get that far. So if you open the letter and you get this final notice of intent to levy, it'll say letter 1068 in the lower right-hand corner. If you get that letter, then you need to call me or you need to do something. So I'll ask for the hearing most likely, or step in and get something done within the 30 days so that we never get to a levy. Okay, so you don't want to sit on it for 3 weeks because by that time you may not be able to act within the remaining
Right.
week and do something about it. And then you
Tell
can't sleep at
people-
night because you could get up one
Exactly.
morning and so they don't have to get interaction with the court or anything. They can just levy your property without, other than giving you the notice, they can levy your property. But once they give you the notice and you don't do something within that 30-day period, then you could get up the next morning and your account's been wiped out, your checks are bouncing, fees are accumulating, and it's a nightmare.
I think this is our 4th or 5th show, and I'm really learning a lot from this. You don't want to upset those people, do you?
No, as we talked about last time, we talked about, why you should file a return and that something about the penalties. And sort of the theme of the show was there's not a level playing field. They don't play fair, and everything's kind of stacked in their favor. So,
Well, what I'm leading up to is people should not try to handle this themselves.
Nope.
Because I like the expression you could actually give them a roadmap to everything you have and not realize it. It is very important that they hire somebody like yourself, because once they hire you, they don't have to talk to the IRS anymore.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits. They don't have to talk with the IRS, and they don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing. If myself and people in this business, this is what we do every day. So we kind of know what the IRS is looking for and what kind of traps they're setting, and so you really don't want to get into an interview with them without counsel, because you could say something that greatly jeopardizes your case. So I probably get more questions about IRS liens than anything.
Yes.
Everybody's always calling about IRS liens. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit today about IRS liens and levies, because people get those two mixed up. But I get more questions about liens. So the process usually starts with you filing a return. So if you don't have the money to pay and you don't get a refund, then you're going to owe them money. So you file your return on April 15. Takes them about a month to process the return. Once they process the return and they put the liability on the books, a tax lien arises by operation of law. It's just there because the law says it's there. And that basically gives the IRS a security interest in all your property. Bank accounts, real property, cars, whatever. Okay, that's a lien. Okay, so it arises without them doing anything other than assessing the tax. Okay, usually starts about a month after you file the return. Then the IRS goes one step further and actually files a notice of the lien in the property records in the county where you reside, based on your last tax return you filed. So Palm Beach County, you live here, they'll file a lien down at the courthouse. They do it every Monday. It's called a notice of federal tax lien. It indicates the year you owe and the amount and so forth. At that point,
What does that do to your credit?
Well, it used to have a more detrimental effect, but about a year or two ago, the 3 credit agencies, Experian, TransUnion, and the other, they got in trouble because they had misidentified some taxpayers. In other words, the lien doesn't have the Social Security on there, the full Social Security. So I suspect they trashed somebody's credit rating, and it was the wrong John Smith or the wrong Mike Miller. So they came out and said, we're no longer going to use federal tax liens to do the FICO scores. So prior to that announcement, which was about 2 years ago, it did impact your FICO score, maybe 100 points by having a tax lien. So it appears that is ended. So that's good news.
Okay.
But still, it's not a good thing, because once it's on the records, it's there for the world to see, and it never goes away. So if at all possible, you want to avoid it from ever getting filed in the first place.
Okay.
But, you're going looking for a job. They're going to do some due diligence. So one of the first things they're going to do is check the public records, because it's public and you can do it from your computer.
Right.
Get the clerk's site up and put in your name, and you can search. They may be looking for criminal charges. They could be looking for anything, but they'll see the federal tax lien there, and depending on the type of job that you're looking for, it could damage your chances.
Bank-
And
bankruptcy
if you're
will
going to buy a car or a house, you're going to probably pay a higher interest rate, because part of their due diligence, they're going to figure if you've got a tax lien, then you're probably going to be a bigger risk to us, and they're going to charge you a higher rate. So it's nothing good that can come out of it. Okay. So I'll talk in a minute about how you can avoid the tax lien. But that's the tax lien, okay. And this is one of the tools, along with the levy and the IRS's collection arsenal. And they use it a lot, and they're very aggressive with it. It's their hammer, okay. The levy's the real hammer, but the lien is an effective tool.
Okay.
The real impact of the notice of federal tax lien, where they put it on notice, is that it will prevent you from selling your house. Because when you get ready to sell your house, you have equity, you're looking forward to getting the money at closing. The closing agent, title agent, will do a title search early in the process, and he'll see the first mortgage that he's got to pay off at closing, for instance, and he'll see the tax lien. And then he'll come back to the seller and say, we can't sell your house because you have a lien on it. We have to give the buyer clean title,
Right.
good title. So you must go to the IRS and work something out to get rid of this lien. And the deal you work out with the IRS is you're going to have to pay them the bulk of the closing proceeds, or at least what you owe the IRS. So they, in effect, get a seat at the closing table. That's why the
Can't
lien
do
is
anything
there.
for this?
Well, bankruptcy can get rid of taxes. Some
but
taxes.
they can't get rid of liens, though.
Well, if you get rid of the tax, the lien does stay, but you're probably going to be okay, because the underlying tax is gone.
Okay.
But that's the issue is too technical for this program. Okay.
Okay.
But basically, the lien, the big impact it has on the taxpayer is they'll never be able to sell their house without clearing it up. And the other impacts it has is just on your credit and getting loans, and the fact that the whole world sees it. Nobody
Yes.
wants the whole world to see. Your neighbor could go do a search, and it's not the end of the world, but it's not something you want to have if you can avoid it. So that's the lien. Okay. The other thing that people get mixed up is liens versus levies. So a levy is where the IRS is now exercising that security interest. That lien is a security interest. Okay. So they're exercising that security interest to actually take property from you. That's a levy. So most of the time it's a levy on your bank account, where they take the funds right out of your bank account. Or it's a levy on your wages, where they send a notice of garnishment to your payroll department, and they start taking your check every week. Those are the two biggest things. They can also levy an IRA, so forth. For a house, they have to get court approval, so they rarely will try to take a house.
Okay.
So that's a levy, and that's their most effective tool, because that's where they actually take the money from you. Okay. So let's talk about a minute about how you might be able to avoid the lien. Okay. So the lien is harder to get rid of than the levy, harder to avoid. The lien has less impact than the levy, because the levy is much more damaging to take money from you.
Right.
So with the lien, after the recession, the government realized, how people were struggling, and how people were trying to get back on their feet and find employment and deal with their foreclosures, and they realized how damaging the tax lien can be. So they put into place some rules which allowed people to, in some cases, get rid of the tax lien. Okay. So basically, if you owe less than, in today's rules, if you owe less than $50,000 to the IRS, and you enter into an installment agreement, and you make your payments by direct debit right out of your bank account each month, they will, if they haven't already filed the lien, you can get them to not file it. They won't file it, which is the best case scenario. Because
That's where you come in, though.
well, at that point, yeah, I have to set it all up. But if you get a hold of me soon enough, and I can show you how to avoid getting the tax lien filed in the first place, which is the ideal scenario. Because once the tax lien is filed, it never goes away. It stays on your record. Even if you pay off your tax liability and you
Stays?
get it released, it's not like they go in there and pull that tax lien out of the record so it disappears.
Wow.
They just simply issue a new document called a certificate of lien release, and they file it in the court records. And so when somebody does a search, they see the tax lien and then they see the release. So it's good that you released it. They
Right.
know that you took care of your taxes,
But
but
they know
they
at
can
one
also see
time-
that at one time you were delinquent.
Exactly.
So you want to avoid that in the first place. So if you owe less than 50 and you enter this installment agreement, and you don't even have to show any financials for the installment agreement, you can avoid getting the lien filed in the first place. If the lien has already been filed, then you can go in and set up the installment agreement, and once you make 3 timely installment payments, they will release the lien. Okay, that's if you owe less than 50. If you owe more than 50, then if you have the funds, you can pay it down to less than 50, and then you can do all those things I just described.
Okay.
If you owe more than 50, then it's more problematic to get it removed. So those are some options for people that don't have too big of a balance to get the lien removed, or possibly, in best case situation, never have it filed in the first place. Okay? And then as far as a levy, as I mentioned, levy is much more damaging because they're actually taking money. You could get up one morning and have no money in your bank account,
Exactly.
which is a disaster. So
Because
the
you
way-
can't put any in either.
yeah,
can't make a
you have no
deposit.
funds, your checks are bouncing, it's fees coming on top of fees, and so it's a real nightmare. And you may not be able to get a hold of the IRS to work something out because they may be on vacation or out in the
Right.
field or whatever. So it's a real bad situation. So you never want to let it get that far. And so remember I said a minute ago, you get a fair warning on a levy. They have to send you a notice. So you want to open that letter, you want to call my office, and we'll deal with it, and the levy will never happen. We'll nip it in the bud before it ever happens, okay? And if worst case scenario, if you call me on the last day and we don't have time, like you ignore the letter until the 28th day, I can still stop it because I can ask for that hearing. And when you ask for the hearing, while the hearing is pending, and it usually takes 3 or 4 months to have the hearing, while the hearing is pending, they cannot do any collection activity, so they can't levy you now.
Okay.
So the revenue officer who is getting ready to raid your bank account, she has to put the file on the shelf and wait 3 or 4 months until the hearing is held. And then at the hearing, I would get some resolution of your account so that the levy would never happen. So
What
that's,
do you do when people come to you? Do they haven't paid taxes in 10 years?
some haven't. Some hadn't filed returns. Some may have filed.
Do
but
they have
didn't
the
money.
paperwork still? Or do you have to recreate it?
Well, if they haven't filed returns, I do recreate the returns.
Okay.
So we do that by asking for wage and income transcripts, which the IRS keeps for a number of years. And that shows all the 1099s and W-2s that have been sent in that person's name and social security
Okay.
number. And so we recreate
So they'll give you those.
they'll give you the income.
Okay.
But, the hard part is what expenses did they have in 2012
Right.
or 11? So that's when the taxpayer, that's why you never want to get behind that far. Because it's real hard to go back and recreate a return from 5 years ago. You don't even remember what you were doing.
Well, how
what's
far
left.
does the IRS go back?
Usually, if you're a non-filer, about 6 years.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
So if you hadn't filed in 10 years and you want to get clean, and I call them up, they would normally say, okay, we want them to file, 6 years, including 17.
Wow.
So
How do you
13,
hear
15,
these
12
things?
through 17 would be
Okay.
6 years. And so then you file your returns. Sometimes they've already done one for you, which I mentioned last time, the substitute return, which your tax is always overstated.
Yes.
So when you file, they will throw theirs out and they will accept yours, and your tax will automatically go down to what it really should be.
Because they don't show any deductions at all.
No, they don't. And so the tax gets corrected, but you still got penalties and interest. So you can correct that, and then you got to resolve your liability. Now you're compliant with your filing obligations, but now you've got this big liability.
Okay.
So then you've got to deal with that through either installment agreement, offering compromise, uncollectible, bankruptcy, whatever.
There's different ways
Yeah, there's
that they'll
really
settle with you.
there's really 4 things you can do when you owe. Okay, bankruptcy is one. I'm not a bankruptcy lawyer. I don't do it, but some taxes, if they're old enough, can be discharged in bankruptcy, just like credit card debt and other unsecured debt. Basically, it's got to be 3 years, but when you file the bankruptcy, it's got to be more than 3 years after the return was due for a particular tax year. And so you owe a lot of money for 2013 tax year. So it's got to be more than 3 years since the 13 return was due, which would be April 15 to 14. So if you were doing it today, that would be met. It's got to be more than 2 years since the tax return was actually filed. Could have been filed late.
Right.
And more than 240 days since the tax was assessed. So generally that happens around the time you file. But it could be an audit 3 years later. So anyway, you meet all those tests, generally that tax year can be discharged. So you would go to a bankruptcy lawyer and say, He would ask you what other debt you've got. You might have credit card debt and some other stuff. And so you might just decide to do bankruptcy, throw it all in there, and those taxes can be discharged.
So for the
And the other, let me just real quick, the other three options are if you don't have any income coming in and you're really down on your luck, say you're out of work at the present
Okay.
time, you can get them to put you in uncollectible, which means you still owe the amount of money that they think you owe, and but you don't have to pay anything right now. They'll let you slide, and they'll circle back with you maybe in a year or two, probably a year, and ask you if you've gotten on your feet now and you can pay.
Okay.
So that's a relief. You know, the interest is still accruing and some penalties, but at least you've got them off your back for a
Right.
year. But that would only be where you have absolutely no income, and you have to prove it to them.
Oh, I'm sure.
That's two. Number three is you just simply enter into an installment agreement. You start paying them some amount of money each month to pay off your balance. And then number four is where you get the most bang for your buck, and that's where you do an offering compromise. Try to get a one-time settlement for something less than you currently owe.
So those are those stories you hear
Those are
where
the four.
someone owes 50 grand.
Yeah, and they say you can get a pennies on the dollar.
Is that really true?
No, not pennies,
Okay.
but I have gotten plenty at 20%. I
Wow.
would say 20 to 25% is more realistic, but it really depends on your assets and your income.
Okay.
So, but no, they're not cutting too many deals at 1%.
What about a spouse?
Yeah, interesting question. So,
So they have an income tax liability.
so here's how it usually comes up, Steve. Somebody comes into my office. Usually, it's a woman, and she says, I got a problem. I owe $70,000, and I was married to someone years ago, and we filed a joint return during those years, say 2015. We filed a joint return, and I learned that the husband was the only one working. So the person was a stay-at-home mother, for example. And she says, what can I do about this? Because now I've moved on, I've remarried, or I'm single, and I got this $80,000 or $50,000 liability, and it's not fair. So, the first point I want to make is if you're out there and you're doing this every year and you're in that situation, you ought to seriously consider this April when you file the 2018 return. You ought to seriously consider not signing that joint return.
Right.
You don't have to sign it. You can file your own return and just include your own income and file married filing separately and have your husband or your spouse, could be the other way, have your spouse file his or her own return. And if you do that, you're not liable for your spouse's tax.
Oh, okay.
It's only when you sign the joint return that you make yourself liable. And when you do that, both of the spouses are what's called jointly and severally liable, which means the IRS can collect all the tax from either one of them. They don't have to go 50-50. They can collect it. Let's say in my example, the wife has money from an inheritance, and she has a bank account with a lot of money in it, and the husband doesn't have any assets. But he caused the underpayment because he was the only one working, and he wasn't paying his taxes as he went. Would be very unfair to take the money from the wife, right? Because she didn't create the liability. But because it's joint and several liability, the IRS, if they find the wife's bank account and want to collect it, they can collect it all from her.
Wow.
Okay, and that's even if they're separated and divorced still. She's still liable up to 10 years later. So if they find
10
her
years?
8 years later and he's doesn't have any assets and she has money, they can take it all from her.
Wow.
So
Even if they're not married anymore.
that's right, because it never goes away. Once you sign that return, you're jointly and severally liable just as much as the other party until the statute of limitations ends, and that's 10 years. So basically, when they come in, I often ask, well, why did you sign the return? What happens is that the accountant usually represents the husband, and it is true that if you sign a joint return as a couple, you'll pay less taxes because
Okay.
you get more favorable tax rate. So you save a few dollars there. But he's generally not worried about the wife. He's worried about the husband.
Right.
And he's worried about his job is to save as much taxes as possible. How does he do that? He gets him to sign a joint return. So the story usually is they showed up with the return. I signed it. I didn't know anything about it. And now we're 5 years later or whatever, and she's got a liability. So if you can go back and, in hindsight, you don't want to sign that return. Even though you may pay a little more tax as a household, you don't want to sign that return.
Right.
Unless you know that the tax is going to be paid. But what happens is the wife signs a return and then they file it April 15 and then the husband doesn't include a check. And then they've got a big liability. So if you have any doubts that the husband or the wife, could be the wife, the income earning spouse, you have any doubt that they're not going to include a check with the payment, then you probably don't want to sign it. You'll never be liable. File your own return, and it also creates opportunities later. Let's say you're still married and you want to buy a house.
Right.
Well, and you took my advice and the wife didn't sign the return, but the husband signed his own return and he has a big IRS debt. Well, when you buy the house, you can put the house in the wife's name.
Wife's name.
Then the tax lien filed against the husband, which is already there or will be there, will not attach to the
can't do it,
house
right.
because she doesn't owe the IRS anything. So
Wow.
But unfortunately, people don't get the right advice when they're doing the return. So I hope somebody hears this.
And maybe you don't think about that. Oh, you don't think about
And
divorce.
the accountant should, whoever did the return, the taxpayer, could be a lawyer, could be an accountant, should be advising them of these, especially if you've got one spouse who had all the income.
Right.
If they both have income, then they're both liable anyway. It's just not that big of a difference. But where it really is inequitable is when you have one spouse that doesn't work, the other spouse works, created all the liability, and when the non-income spouse signs, makes himself liable. So,
Well, we started off the show today about a young lady who has that envelope. I hope after today you're going to open that envelope and you're going to give
act on it. She needs to open it and act on it. Not procrastinate.
Give everybody your phone number
It's 561-313-5678.
and your website.
Yeah. www.palmbeachcountytaxattorney.com.
Okay. One more time on the phone number.
Five-
Someone's out there trying to get the number.
Yeah, it's 561-313-5678. The last part's easy. 5678. 313-5678.
I love when you come on. It goes by. Look at this, how fast it goes. Great information. We'll be back again with attorney Michael Miller next month. And I'll see you next week with more Ask the Experts.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Ask the Expert Show, featuring interviews with local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Call our office at 888